What is emptiness? Understanding the heart of Buddhism. Life often feels full of complexities, tensions, and misunderstandings. We look at the world and ourselves through layers of judgments, attachments, and assumptions. Yet, amidst this seeming chaos, the Buddha offered a profound way to see clearly, free from confusion. He said, "In what is seen, there is only the seen. In what is heard, there is only the heard. In what is sensed, there is only the sensed. In what is cognized, there is only the cognized. This is how you should train yourself." This teaching is an invitation to experience reality directly, without filters of desire or aversion. It points to a practice of seeing things as they are, a skill that can liberate the mind from suffering. This way of perceiving transforms not just how we see, but how we live. Chapter 1. The Essence of Emptiness, Shunyata. Emptiness, or shunyata, is one of the most profound and transformative teachings of Buddhism. At first glance, the word emptiness might sound negative or even frightening. People often think it means nothingness, a void, or a denial of the world. But in Buddhism, emptiness isn't about rejecting life. It's about understanding it deeply. Shunyata is not nihilism. It doesn't mean that nothing exists. Instead, it reveals the interdependent nature of all things. The Buddha taught that everything arises due to causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently, by itself, or with a permanent essence. This is what emptiness points to: the absence of inherent existence. It is not a rejection of reality, but a deeper insight into how reality actually works. The Buddha explained this beautifully in a teaching about the concept of self. He said, "Just as a chariot is not found in any of its parts, nor in the whole, so the self is not found in any part of the body, nor in the whole body." This illustrates that what we call self is a collection of parts, our thoughts, feelings, memories, and body, coming together temporarily. There's no solid, unchanging core to cling to. Understanding shunyata helps us see life with clarity and freedom. Think about a wave in the ocean. We can point to a wave and say, "This is a wave," but where does the wave end and the ocean begin? The wave exists only because of the water, the wind, and the conditions around it. In the same way, everything we see, touch, and experience exists because of countless interconnected causes and conditions. Nothing stands alone. The Buddha encouraged us to see this interconnectedness, saying, "All conditioned things are impermanent." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Realizing that nothing is permanent or independent can be liberating. It doesn't mean we stop caring about the world or the people in our lives. Instead, it allows us to hold them with love and compassion, without clinging or fear of losing them. Shunyata is also deeply practical. It teaches us not to cling to fixed ideas or identities. How often do we get stuck thinking, "I am this kind of person," or "this is how life should be"? These rigid beliefs cause suffering because life is always changing. Emptiness invites us to let go of those mental walls and embrace the fluid, interconnected nature of reality. In Buddhism, shunyata is like a mirror. A mirror doesn't hold on to the images it reflects. It doesn't say, "I am this image," or "I am not that image." It simply reflects whatever appears. Similarly, when we understand emptiness, we can engage with the world without being trapped by rigid ideas or attachments. This is not an escape from reality, but a way to live more freely and compassionately within it. By understanding emptiness, we also develop compassion. When we see that everyone is interconnected and that no one has a fixed, independent self, it becomes clear that others' happiness and suffering are not separate from our own. As the Dalai Lama says, the more we care for the happiness of others, the greater our own sense of well-being becomes. Shunyata helps us recognize this truth deeply and live it in our daily lives. Chapter 2. The Interdependent Nature of Reality. To truly grasp emptiness, we need to explore the idea of interdependence, also known as dependent origination, praticca-samutpada. The Buddha taught that everything arises in dependence on causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently. This is a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy and practice. Let's start with a simple example. A tree. When we look at a tree, we might think of it as a single solid thing. But if we look more closely, we see that the tree depends on many factors. It needs sunlight, water, soil, and air to grow. It also relies on seeds from other trees and the people or animals that may have spread those seeds. Even the tree's existence depends on our perception. Without someone to label it as tree, what would it be? This interconnectedness extends to everything in life. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, even the thoughts we think, all arise from countless interactions and influences. The Buddha described this beautifully. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. Dependent origination also applies to the self. Most of us feel like we have a solid, unchanging identity. But who we are is shaped by countless factors: our family, culture, experiences, and even our biology. Just as a wave depends on the ocean, we depend on the conditions around us. When those conditions change, we change too. This realization can be unsettling at first. If there's no fixed self, who are we? But rather than seeing this as a loss, it's an opportunity. If the self is not fixed, then we are not bound by our past or our habits. We can grow, adapt, and connect with others in meaningful ways. Emptiness also applies to phenomena, the things we see, hear, and experience. Nothing has an inherent essence or exists on its own. Take a cup, for example. We think of it as a cup, but its existence depends on its parts, like clay and glaze, the process of its creation, and our perception of it as something useful for holding liquid. Without those conditions, it would not be a cup. It might just be a lump of clay. Nagarjuna, one of Buddhism's great philosophers, said, "Things derive their being and nature by mutual dependence and are nothing in themselves." This insight is central to understanding emptiness. It shows us that the way we label and categorize the world is not reality itself, but a useful way of navigating it. Understanding the interdependent nature of reality also helps us let go of attachment and aversion. When we realize that things are not as solid or permanent as they seem, we can approach them with a sense of openness and curiosity. Instead of clinging to what we like or rejecting what we don't, we can see them as temporary and interconnected parts of a larger whole. This understanding is not just intellectual, it's something to be felt and lived. Through meditation and mindfulness, we can begin to experience the world's interdependence directly. The Buddha said, "Meditate, bhikkhus. Do not delay, or else you will regret it later. This is my instruction to you." By practicing mindfulness, we can see how our thoughts and emotions arise and pass away, just like everything else. In daily life, recognizing interdependence can transform how we relate to others. When we see that we are not separate from the people around us, we naturally feel more empathy and compassion. Their joys and struggles are connected to our own. This doesn't mean losing our individuality. It means expanding our sense of self to include the larger web of life. The teaching of dependent origination is sometimes compared to a net, where each knot is connected to every other knot. Pull one thread, and the whole net moves. This is the nature of reality. Everything influences and is influenced by everything else. When we understand this, we can live with greater awareness, kindness, and peace. By embracing the interdependent nature of reality, we take the first steps toward understanding emptiness, not as a void, but as a profound and liberating truth. Chapter 3. Emptiness in Practice. Understanding emptiness intellectually is one thing, but experiencing it directly is where its true power lies. Buddhist teachings emphasize that shunyata, emptiness, is not just a concept to analyze. It's a truth to be realized through practice. This realization isn't abstract or distant. It can profoundly transform the way we live and perceive the world. Meditation is the primary way to experience emptiness. When we sit in meditation, we create the space to observe the nature of our thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. The Buddha encouraged his disciples to reflect deeply. All phenomena are empty of self. By examining our experiences, we start to see how nothing arises independently. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation depends on countless causes and conditions. One practical method for meditating on emptiness is to observe the arising and passing of thoughts. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. As thoughts appear, ask yourself, where did this thought come from? Where does it go? Does it have a solid existence? Or is it like a cloud passing through the sky? Over time, you'll notice that thoughts are not as solid or permanent as they seem. They arise, linger briefly, and then dissolve back into silence. Another technique is to focus on the body. We often think of the body as me or mine, but when we examine it closely, we see it is made up of parts: skin, bones, blood, organs. None of these parts alone constitute me, and the body itself depends on external factors like food, air, and water. The Buddha taught, "This body, brethren, is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is to be regarded as old karma, to be seen as arising and ceasing." This reflection helps us loosen the grip of attachment and see the body for what it truly is, a temporary collection of elements. Contemplating emptiness also cultivates compassion. When we see that we are not separate from others, that our existence is interwoven with theirs, our natural response is kindness. Imagine a drop of water falling into the ocean. The drop doesn't lose itself. It becomes part of something greater. In the same way, recognizing emptiness allows us to expand our sense of self to include all beings. Wisdom and compassion are often described as the two wings of a bird. Wisdom understands the nature of emptiness, while compassion moves us to alleviate the suffering of others. Together, they enable us to fly toward liberation. As the Dalai Lama says, "Through wisdom, we understand emptiness. Through compassion, we connect with others. Both are essential." When we bring the understanding of emptiness into daily life, we can approach challenges with a sense of ease. For example, when faced with criticism, we can remind ourselves that the criticism arises from conditions, the other person's perspective, their experiences, and even our own actions. This doesn't mean we ignore the criticism, but it helps us see it without taking it personally. Similarly, when we experience joy, we can appreciate it fully, knowing it too is impermanent and dependent on conditions. Emptiness in practice is about balance. It doesn't mean disengaging from life or denying its beauty. Instead, it's about seeing things as they are, interconnected, ever-changing, and free of fixed essence. This perspective allows us to live with greater freedom, compassion, and joy. Chapter 4: Key Teachings on Emptiness. The teachings on emptiness are vast and profound, but two sources stand out as foundational: the Heart Sutra and the philosophy of Nagarjuna, the great Buddhist scholar of the Madhyamaka school. The Heart Sutra is one of the most well-known texts in Mahayana Buddhism. Its famous declaration, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form," encapsulates the essence of shunyata. At first glance, this statement can seem paradoxical. How can form, the tangible, physical world, be the same as emptiness, which is intangible and formless? The sutra invites us to look deeper. It's not saying that form ceases to exist. Rather, it's pointing out that form has no inherent independent existence. It exists only in relation to other factors. Consider a cup. The cup exists because of its materials: clay, glaze, the potter who shaped it, and the purpose we assign to it, holding liquid. Without these conditions, there is no cup. The Heart Sutra reminds us that this is true for all phenomena. Everything we perceive as form is, in essence, empty of inherent nature. Nagarjuna expanded on this teaching through his Madhyamaka philosophy. He argued that emptiness is the middle way between two extremes: eternalism, the belief that things have a permanent essence, and nihilism, the belief that nothing exists. Nagarjuna famously said, "Emptiness is not a denial of existence. It is the denial of inherent existence." One of Nagarjuna's key insights is that emptiness itself is empty. This means that emptiness is not a separate, ultimate reality. It's simply a way of describing the interdependent nature of all things. He used logical arguments to demonstrate this, such as the fourfold negation, which shows that things neither exist, nor do not exist, nor both, nor neither. These teachings are not meant to confuse us, but to break down our habitual ways of thinking and help us see the world as it truly is. The Heart Sutra also emphasizes the practical implications of emptiness. It says that when we realize emptiness, we go beyond fear and suffering. This is because so much of our suffering comes from clinging to ideas, possessions, identities, and even life itself. When we see that there is nothing solid to cling to, we can let go and find freedom. Other Buddhist texts also provide practical insights into emptiness. For example, the Diamond Sutra teaches that even the teachings themselves are empty. The Buddha said, "If you see me in forms, if you seek me in sounds, you are on the wrong path." The true Buddha cannot be seen in form or heard in sound. This reminds us not to become attached to concepts, even those that point to the truth. In essence, the teachings on emptiness are not just philosophical. They are meant to transform the way we see and experience the world. They show us how to let go of fixed ideas and open our hearts to the infinite possibilities of interdependent existence. By understanding and living these teachings, we can move closer to the ultimate goal of Buddhism: liberation from suffering and the realization of true peace. Chapter 5: Emptiness as the Path to Liberation. Emptiness is not just a philosophical concept or a meditation practice. It is the very path to liberation. By understanding and experiencing shunyata, we can transcend suffering and find true peace. This journey is not about escaping from the world, but about seeing it clearly and living with wisdom and compassion. At its core, emptiness teaches us to let go of clinging. Clinging is the root of suffering, as the Buddha explained in the Four Noble Truths. We cling to ideas, possessions, relationships, and even our own identity. But when we look deeply, we see that everything we cling to is impermanent and dependent on causes and conditions. By letting go, we free ourselves from the cycle of attachment and aversion that keeps us trapped in dissatisfaction. The Buddha described this path in simple yet profound terms. Just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so too does my teaching have one taste, the taste of liberation. Emptiness is the gateway to this liberation. It allows us to see through the illusions that bind us and open our hearts to the truth of interdependence. In practical terms, integrating the understanding of emptiness into daily life can transform how we approach challenges and relationships. For example, when conflicts arise, we can reflect on the emptiness of the situation. This doesn't mean denying the conflict, but understanding that it arises from a web of causes and conditions, our own actions, the other person's experiences, and the environment we share. By seeing the situation clearly, we can respond with wisdom and compassion rather than reacting out of anger or fear. Emptiness also helps us cultivate gratitude. When we see how interconnected we are with others and the world around us, we naturally feel appreciation for the conditions that support our lives. The food we eat, the air we breathe, the kindness of friends and strangers, all of these arise from countless interdependent causes. Recognizing this can fill our hearts with a sense of wonder and humility. On a deeper level, emptiness allows us to transcend the fear of death. The self we cling to is not fixed or permanent. It is a dynamic process shaped by conditions. When we understand this, we see that death is not the end of a solid self, but a transition in the flow of interdependent phenomena. This perspective doesn't diminish the value of life, but enriches it, allowing us to live fully and fearlessly. The Buddha often used metaphors to illustrate the nature of emptiness and liberation. One famous metaphor is that of a lotus flower. The lotus grows out of muddy water, yet it remains unstained. In the same way, we can live in the world, fully engaged with its joys and challenges, while remaining free from the attachments that cause suffering. Emptiness is the clarity and openness that allows us to do this. Ultimately, the path of emptiness is a path of freedom. It frees us from the illusions that bind us, the fears that limit us, and the attachments that cause suffering. It opens the door to a life of wisdom, compassion, and peace. As the Buddha said, the wise one, meditative and resolute, sees the way to freedom and walks it with joy.